something else out there that's maybe like an operant power. But I think that one of the things too that always bothered me, like as I got older, is that in my experience at least, like when I used to go to church, I feel like there's a lot of the Bible that churches I went to just didn't teach about. Like I know that there's, I forget what book it's in, but there's a part of the Bible that basically talks about how like we as humans have the same abilities, to as Jesus did, to kind of create the lives we want, the realities that we want. Like we are as powerful as he is. And so I feel like, you know, when you go to like, a Catholic church, it's really taught that like Jesus and God are like the operant powers, and kind of that like we're all beneath that. So I kind of just unsubscribed from all of that. And so I've definitely become like more spiritual over the years as opposed to religious.
Richard, how about you?
Yeah, I believe in God. I wish I believed in, like, I kind of struggle with my faith a little bit, I think. But I do try to practice it. Yeah.
Why do you say you struggle?
So like logically, it doesn't make much sense to me.
You believe it anyway.
But especially I think over the last 2 years or so, like I started like trying to practice my faith a lot more, and some different things happened in my life that kind of got me to reading the Bible. And I actually go to FCA, which is like the student athlete, it's Fellowship of Christian Student Athletes. So when I go there, like I see a lot of people have really close relationships with God and with Jesus, and so seeing that's kind of inspiring. But again, like myself, like it's a work in progress. So
It sounds many ways like you're talking about Izzy's family.
Yeah,
that it provides a community rather than some answers. You're muted, Rich. We couldn't hear your last sentence. Nope. We still can't hear you. You're still muted. All of a sudden. Yes, now I heard that.
Yeah, something came up that said I was like, my internet thing was unstable. But yeah, it's it's something that I work on.
Christina, how about you?
So I think I'm pretty much like aligned with what Joe said. I don't consider myself to be a religious person, and I was raised Catholic. And I don't really think that I believe in God in terms of what Catholicism has said, but kind of like Melissa, I do think there is something out there. I'm just not so sure that it's exactly what I've been taught or what the Bible says and whatnot.
How about you, Victoria?
For me, I would say I do believe in God. Unlike some of the other people who have said that they believe, I've never really had a lot of religion in my family. Like my cousins and my mom's like sisters and stuff are pretty religious. Like my cousins had communions and they went to church and things like that. But in my house, my mom was raised Catholic and my dad was raised Jewish. So to not, really hurt either set of grandparents, my brother and I were kind of raised in the middle, so we were exposed to, things on our Catholic side and things on our Jewish side, but we were never specifically raised with one thing. So I think I do believe in God, but not in terms of like the religious aspect of it, if that makes sense, because I wasn't raised with the religious aspect in my life. I got in touch with like my Jewish side of like things and religion when I lived in Israel for a year. But other than that, I just know about, those different things from my experiences with other members of my family.
How did
But
your family deal with Hanukkah and Christmas?
so my dad's parents used to go down to Florida for the winter. So before they would go down to Florida, we would do like a Christmaka before it was like a thing and cool. So they would give us like all our Hanukkah presents on one night because we would go over there for Friday night dinners all the time. So they would give us all our gifts on our Friday night dinner that coincided with Hanukkah or just before they left to go down to Florida. And then with my mom's side of the family, we would just do our regular Christmas celebration.
Kind of like a Florida.
Yeah.
How about you, Alana?
So I definitely believe in God. I was raised Catholic. But of course, like I've had my own like journey with religion and so I believe in God. It's kind of hard to answer why, but it just honestly it brings me like a lot of happiness and fulfillment into my life. Like I've spent a lot of time, like I'm sure we all have, like questioning and thinking and desperately searching for answers. Like, why are we here? Like, where did this all begin? Where did we start? But it just brings me a lot of like just happiness and like peace to just believe in God and that there's something there. And it just it brings me a lot of like fulfillment into my life and like purpose.
So it's almost as if there doesn't have to be a God. It's just that the belief in there being a God is what gives you the peace and the fulfillment.
It does. I know I would go crazy if I didn't have like that to always just lean back on almost. Like I just don't want to be like I don't want to say like a miserable like person, but I just want to be like happy and just to believe that there's a God and like it just like brings more fulfillment into my life.
Oh, thank you. Jason, how about you?
I do believe in God. I was raised in a religious household or semi-religious household, and I do pray probably every day. Well, I do pray every day, but my relationship with God is, I like look at it differently than most people. I don't necessarily look at the Bible and the Torah as being books that are like, this is what exactly happened, like this is how it went, but I see it as there are answers and stories that you can learn lessons from. And even if it's not true like fact, you can still learn from the mistakes and the lessons that other people have learned from. Like look at Disney, a lot of the movies like The Lion King are based on like biblical stories. So these recurring themes I think are really interesting. And also for me, it's really also a cultural thing too, because when I came to college, I met a lot of people through doing religious stuff, and I was able to meet like a lot of friends. So I do believe in God, and it's probably definitely is due to my cultural upbringing.
It's like you're combining Alana's and Melissa's spirituality with Izzy's sense of community.
But one thing I want to say is like what I've learned over the years of like studying text and with like being in different groups is that it's okay. Like a lot of people find this question kind of like deer in headlights, like I don't know what to say, but this is something that if you don't, it's okay. If you do, it's okay. Like everyone has their own belief, but I like this question, this conversation, because it shows how you can, still listen from other people and learn from them, because I heard some people's responses, which were really enlightening, and it's kind of cool to see how everyone thinks differently.
Christopher, how about you?
Yeah, I think like many other people, I grew up in a pretty religious household. I was raised Catholic, confirmed, baptized, and all that. but I find myself as I grew older aligning more with agnostic belief. Depressing view of religion, where I view humans as just another animal on this planet, just of a higher order of intelligence. And we consume calories, and once we're unable to do that, we die and you lose consciousness, and that's it. And I know that's very depressing, but I only find comfort in the fact that there's a very finite end, a very black and white end to life. But with that being said, I've always thought, I may not believe in God, but I do think organized religion is very important, in the sense that I do think it serves as a great moral guide, and it gives a lot of people direction and guidance, kind of what Alana was saying, that at times I find myself envying. And so in that sense, I do think it's still very important, and I've always respected other people's religions, and especially in my own household. It was actually interesting. I just recently read something. It was an historical fiction novel, but there's a theory out there, I guess, that it kind of coincides science with religion, in the sense that, yes, evolution can occur, and what people think as non-religion can occur, but there's a moment right before, let's say, the Big Bang happened, where there's some sort of divine intervention, and then evolution as we know it took place. And I think that's the closest I've come to believing that, hey, maybe there is a higher power, where there wasn't challenging me and my beliefs, and also not making me uncomfortable, in the sense that I didn't have to make a leap of faith, which I often find difficult to do. So I guess you could say it's a complicated relationship with me and any other religion.
Why do you describe agnostic as a cop-out?
Because you have people that say, yes, there is a God, and then you have atheists that say, there is no God, and here's the proof. Whereas I think it's agnosticism, in the sense that I understand it, is saying, I don't believe in God because I can't really see it. I can't really see any proof of there being God. But listen, if God were to come down, if Jesus were to come down from the skies, and yet start believing in it. So I think it's kind of that middle of the road. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't kind of answer. At least that's the conclusion I have formed on being agnostic, just through discussions with my family, who are very Catholic, and my friends who are also very Christian.
You also said you find comfort in that there's a finite end. Could you explain that?
Yeah, I think, especially growing up Catholic, I went to Mass every Sunday, and I just found it hard to, again, make that leap of faith, to believe that once I died, I was gonna I face this final judgment, and there's a prospect of me going to hell and burning forever, but also like living in this eternal paradise. Whereas knowing that, listen, I'm just another species of animal, you can say, on this planet, like millions of other humans on this planet, and like any other animal, I live and I die. And I think just having that, I get that very black and white answer. You live and then you die, you don't have consciousness, and that's it. And you don't know you're dead, let's say. It's just you live and you die, and that's it. I find that very comforting. I'm not intimidated by a final judgment. I'm not intimidated by hell or heaven or any of that. It's just, I'll lose consciousness one day, and that's it.
And the last thing you raised, you did say you sort of value in religion for providing a moral guide. Could you explain that?
Yeah. For example, the 10 Commandments, I think what's listed there's a very righteous principles to what many people would consider proper living. And I think for many people, having those kinds of principles in your life and trying to mold your life out of, to abide by those principles, gives you a sense of purpose, gives you a sense of, listen, killing is wrong, right? That's just a moral right that you have to live by. And I think without Christianity, without those 10 Commandments, I think there'd be a lot of, not confusion, but I guess you could say anarchy. Whereas I think for religion, it provides a sense of structure and guidance to a lot of people's lives, which I respect. And like I said, I sometimes envy.
Would anybody else like to ask Christopher a question? Okay, then Ryan, we're up to you.
So yeah, I believe in God. but I honestly don't have a good reason as to why, I guess. I'm not overly religious. I mean, I believe in God, and I've been to religion and got communion, confirmation, and all that, and baptized, but I don't know. I'm just a loose believer, I guess. I wish I had more to add to it, but I really don't know kind of how to explain it any more than that. That I do, but I don't really have any basis to back it up on.
Anwar.
I find that there is a system that is greater than living organisms and humankind. That is the system of how things work in the universe. For me, I don't personally ascribe to the personification of that greater order. And I am very careful to understand religion's place in humane society. Its benefits of keeping order and traditions and drawing people together, and its adversities and negative byproducts such as bigotry, all kinds of isms and the justifications therein. So I keep a very balanced sense of everything's purpose. So for me, again, the personification of a higher order is not something that I personally ascribe to.
Can you just explain what you mean by a personification?
So there is a name for God, and in many, religious circles that I've seen, it's personified as male. And for me right there, something can't be supreme if it's bound by biological gender and the personification of gender. So that just doesn't work for me. I just think that for me, I have to stand back and look at things for what they are versus the stories and, the euphoric benefits that people reap from there. Happy to answer any more questions. I don't know how to further explain it beyond that, though.
Jason, did you want to say something?
Well, actually, excuse me. I wanted to follow up to that. So when I was in Hebrew school, we actually learned how God is not a person, and like this kind of like to support what you're saying, and God is like within you and around you. And on a Jewish holiday, we shake something that's like, we basically shake like a tree branch and something that looks like a lemon, and you shake it around, and it's to show like that the words of the Torah, the words of the Bible, I'm sure everyone here, I don't know who would know Torah, but to show you that the words are like around.
The Torah is the Old Testament, the Old Testament, as opposed to the New Testament.
Yeah, so it's what Jews read, and so it's just to show, you shake the lulav and the etrog to show like that the Torah is around and God is all around. And so when we ask our Hebrew school teacher, like, where is God? Who is God? They would always tell us, oh, God is in you. God is around. So I kind of agree with that interpretation.
I think I should just follow with one more comment. I just believe in treating others well and being of service and being available to knowledge that is beyond what one human being can comprehend. And I believe that we should never stop learning and that we should always learn how to be better listeners to one another. So I should always state what I do believe as opposed to what I don't. So I just want to leave that there.
No, in some ways that's Christopher was talking about, that what we needed was a moral guide. And that's what I think you're addressing. Tiffany?
Um, my relationship with believing in God has kind of always been up and down. My because there's so many religions in my family. My dad's Muslim. My mom went to Catholic school. She was Catholic. Then she became a Jehovah Witness, and then she became she like has her own belief now. I don't even know what she does. My grandmother is very, very serious Catholic. My grandfather was Jewish. So I just had a bunch of different religions around me growing up. So I've seen the different aspects of their beliefs and so forth. But for me personally, I tried doing I tried like being as Catholic as I could. Like I prayed, I brought my kids to Sunday school. I had them both baptized. My older son had his communion. But for me, myself, I personally, every time I've tried to have like a relationship with God, I don't really, I just, it's not something that, that's like I like what Juliana was saying, like I've tried praying when things got bad for me, like trying to figure out answers or something, but I never heard and I never got anything back out of it. So for me, it's a lot like what Anwar was saying. I'm more focused on like a moral thing, like of just being a good person and like seeking knowledge and so forth. Like looking at more into religions, I kind of found myself not like leaning toward like Buddhism or anything like that, but like just kind of their sense of like that you kind of like are reborn and you kind of have your own karma from your previous lives or something like that. Like there's this like bigger that there's this other forceful being or something that kind of, guides you or kind of does something along those lines. For me, it's more of a sense of a moral guide rather than a God for me. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It's just I've been through way too much for me to rely on something like God because he hasn't been there for me. So for me, it's more of a just being the best person that I can be, no matter what life throws in my way.
Given your views in your life, why do you take your children to church?
I try because just because I'm confused doesn't mean I don't want them to have a sense of spirituality or anything like that. Because just because I'm not like that doesn't mean they might not be, and I do want to expose them to something like religion because I wasn't when my mom stopped going to church and everything like that, she kind of stopped doing religious stuff with us in general. And like me and my siblings kind of needed a kind of moral guidance or any kind of guidance at that point. So, I don't want to take that away from them just because I didn't have it or I don't necessarily believe in it.
Jenna? Jenna.
Oh, thank you. So yes, I do believe in God, but I don't necessarily believe in a single religion. Kind of, I think what Chris was saying along the idea that I believe that religion serves as, like he said, like a moral guide almost that should, no matter what religion you look at, really, if you get to the base of it, they're pretty much the same thing with different stories and with different names, in my opinion. I wasn't raised religious, so I have kind of a different view of it. I'm not really biased, I feel like, in that respect as much. I mean, I'm sure I still have biases, but I don't outwardly know one religion, I would say, really strongly. So in my belief, I believe that religion really just serves to show people what they should be doing right and what is good versus what is bad or evil.
Carmelo?
Hello. So I absolutely believe in God. I attend church faithfully. I've been in church for a while now, and I don't know, just attending church and then learning about the Bible, studying the Bible, listening to the word, asking those questions during Bible studies, those difficult questions about why certain things happen, and just getting an understanding of the word, that has led me to believe. And then also just putting your faith into action. So for me, it's like praying, and then like others said, good things happening, or praying and things turning in your favor. Having someone or like a God to go to pray when you're in a tough situation. That moral compass, how to live, how to love others, how to treat people. That I have a standard about how I live my life, and that's because of my religion. So I absolutely believe in God. It just has changed my perspective on life and just has made me a better person.
What do you mean by acting on your faith?
Actually putting my faith into action. So like when you're facing a tough situation, praying and then trusting that God's going to work it out. So like an example, something my family went through, my mom had cancer, right? We pulled to our faith. We prayed. We were attending church. We got prayer. And today my mom is cancer free. So we put that to our faith. That's only God can do that. That doesn't happen for everybody, and I understand that. But at the same time, it's just, again, getting an understanding of the word. So it's whatever his will is, if my mom were to die, I have to accept it as his will. Do I want that? No. But I also believe that Jesus want to come down here from heaven to die for us who are all sinners at one point. So it's whatever his will is. So yes, when I'm faced with a tough situation, I always just turn to God and I trust him for whatever his will is, putting my faith into action and just seeing what he has done for me in my life that has persuaded me to believe.
Now, Tiffany was saying that she felt when she had hard times, she prayed and nothing came through for her. And you're prepared to accept hard times as justified, but still pray.
Yes, still pray and still have faith regardless of. I mean, there's so many questions and so many unanswered questions out there. I mean, we can't answer everything. But really, to me, it just comes down to the belief in just having faith, no matter what, just standing on your faith. No matter what you go through, just stand on your faith.
People have raised a lot of very different ideas. That there needs to be spirituality, whether you believe in organized religion or not. There needs to be community, again, whether you believe in organized religion or not. A sense of a higher power provides rationality to a universe that doesn't seem to be rational often. Sometimes you pray, you have faith, but you don't necessarily get the answers that you ask for. A couple of people described religion as a journey, as a struggle, a searching, as a moral guide, as at least, again, a sense that there's a greater order, a higher power, that it provides order to the world. It helps to provide traditions that bind communities. That it's okay to question, but that your life then becomes the answers. I think it's interesting. No one really talked about the church as an institution. It doesn't seem to play that kind of role in most of your lives. Most of you have kind of moved away from the church as an institution. Some of you have, a couple of people popped out, but Jason particularly, said, he rejected that. And I think Juliana said she rejected the church as an institution. Chris, you didn't get to speak because you popped out. So we're going to skip you now, all right?
Yeah, it's fine. Instead, just decided to say nope.
Questions that has philosophers always asking, and historians, social scientists, is that religion seems to be almost a universal function of humanity. It's like wherever you are, people, cultures, especially traditional cultures, maybe today more modern philosophers, as Christopher said, there's more of agnosticism, more questioning. But in traditional societies, there have always been beliefs. Now, another phenomenon that is almost universal is the presence of masks. These masks are also related to spirituality. These are Tibetan masks. But there are masks in virtually every culture. And one of the things that's interesting is the relationship between the masks and the religious beliefs. One of the things that we find in traditional cultures, I don't like to call them primitive, and again, and Romello used the word questioning, is that prior to the development of science, it was very difficult for people to answer questions. People didn't have the knowledge base and or the ability to try to answer the questions about the origin of the world, the origin of humans, the origin of the planet. These things are really very recent that humans have had some understanding of that. You know, the theory of evolution, it emerges in the middle of the 19th century. But the scientific basis for evolution doesn't really occur to the middle of the 20th century, in the 1950s, when they had the technology to unravel DNA. So for most societies, in most human history, religion has played the basis for answering questions that people couldn't answer. I think what people have said here is that a lot of these questions people still have. You know, where did the world begin and how? And what am I doing here? And what is the right way to live? And religion may have been a universal phenomenon because of the nature of the struggles that we have as human beings to live, as individuals, but also as members of society. Religion may have nothing to do with the existence of a supreme being. It may just have to do with the need of people, individuals and communities, to have some answers. Now, one of the things that religion has provided, and a couple of people mentioned it provides a moral code, is religion also provides taboos. What is a taboo? Anwar?
I'm going to try to answer this without being facetious, but it's a set of laws that are based on preferences for a specific set of outcomes. For example, a taboo against same-sex romantic or sexual relations for the benefit of procreation is an example of one that's found in many religions.
So when you say something is taboo, what exactly are you saying?
Forbidden, shunned.
Why would a culture, why would a religion make certain practices taboo?
Because it serves a greater purpose.
What do you mean?
Well, it serves a purpose to keep people akin to it. There's some people who have predispositions to thrive in a religion, whereas other people are not going to thrive in it because of predispositions that are beyond the religious experience, such as biology. When we talk about human sexuality, there's science that actually dissects the origins of it based on, genetics and chromosomes and the disposition of a gestational human being. So that's just one example that I'm very familiar with.
Taboo defines a group. We're the people who don't do these things. Now, that group of people, they may do those things, which is reprehensible because they violate the rules we were given by God, but we don't do those things because we're righteous. So what you're saying, I think, Anwar, is that taboos helped to define the group.
Yeah, and it also creates otherism. It definitely separates human beings from one another based on, from my perspective, predispositions that may or may not be within the natural inclination of given groups of people.
Well, why would you need a taboo on? That's why I don't understand. Why would you need a rule? Don't do this.
It breeds shame.
If it's unnatural, if people aren't going to do it, then why do you need a rule about it? You don't have to have a rule. Don't jump off the bridge. Don't jump in front of a truck, because no one's going to jump off a bridge or jump in front of a truck because you know you're going to get killed. Why do they need taboos about very specific behavior?
Shall I pass the mic? I don't want to hog up
All
the
right, let
space.
Chris go.
Perhaps as a way of controlling a society, maybe setting certain practices that people would normally do, but some people might. As a way of doing it behind closed doors. Like in some places, homosexuality was considered a taboo. You could say it was even considered a taboo in this country. I mean, there's a story of how during the 50s, during the height of the power of the Committee of Un-American Activities, if you accuse somebody of being a communist or homosexual or a socialist, you could basically destroy their lives. So I guess taboos could also be used not also to, monitor behavior and prevent people from doing things that might be detrimental to them, but also as a way of control by saying, here's some things you're not supposed to do, and, keep in line, or you might be accused, then shunned from the community that, where we humans are social animals, we want to be part of the community. So it's a way of thought control.
It's a way of control. It's a way of exercising power. It's a way of monitoring. But you said something else. It's a way of stopping behavior that is normal. I think that's a very important thing, because if it wasn't normal, you wouldn't have to have a taboo because people wouldn't do it. You have the taboo expressly because people do. In the Old Testament, there are hundreds of taboos defining everything, every aspect of how people are supposed to live. One of these sections, one of the 5 books of Moses, is called Leviticus. And Leviticus has a whole section on what you're allowed to eat and what you're not allowed to eat. For example, in Leviticus, camels, coney. Does anybody know what a coney is? It's another word for rabbit. Camels, rabbits. What are swine? Pigs. According to Leviticus, you're not allowed to eat camels, rabbits, pigs, things in the sea and the river that don't have fins or scales. You can't eat vultures, but you can eat cows, goats, fish that have fins, chicken, locust, beetles, crickets, and grasshoppers. Now, just as a rule, raise your hand if you've ever eaten, at least voluntarily, a locust, a beetle, a cricket, or a grasshopper. Joseph, you did. Where?
I was in survival school.
In the military. Which of those did they have you eat?
All three.
Why?
They just, usually they make you get used to like using nature and stuff like that, and just finding food where you usually can't.
So you can eat locusts, beetles, crickets, and grasshoppers.
Yeah, I mean, but you don't want to. I mean, some certain things are poisonous and certain things aren't. And, you know,
You
get
have to
around
learn
that.
the difference.
Yeah.
Victoria, you've eaten them?
Yeah. I went to where was I? I did a trip to Southeast Asia. I went to Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam for like a month. And like that was one of the things. I think I was in Thailand and we were all sitting at a table and like these people just come around and they sell like scorpions that you can eat and crickets and bugs, and like it's just they like cook them and they roast them and then they sell them for like the tourists to eat, or like, you know, the, you know, people who are just there. And all my friends were doing it, so I was like, when else am I gonna get to, you know, eat one
bugs.
of these? And so I said, why not? So I ate part of a scorpion and it was not delicious. Crunchy. And like my friends took video of me doing it. It was no. It was, I did not enjoy it.
How about you, Tiffany?
Well, technically, it wasn't me that actually ate it. So I used to work at a candy store, and at the candy store, they sell like chocolate covered grasshoppers and stuff like that and worms. So I bought them and I fed it to my siblings.
Mean, Tiffany. That was mean.
It was fun. They liked it.
Okay. How come God, when God dictated the Bible, the Old Testament, told them not to eat camels? Jason?
Was it because camels were used for a source of transportation and they couldn't eat them? Because if they did, then there goes trade.
Yeah. How come they couldn't raise and eat rabbits? Did anybody ever see the movie Rabbit Proof Fence or read the book Rabbit Proof Fence about Australia? Chris?
I have not, but Chris, yeah. I have not seen any of those, but I'm guessing it's the fact that rabbits will eat anything, any small amount of grass and all that. And considering the Jewish and Israeli peoples within a particularly desert climate, you know, where there's very little grassland and plants to begin with, I can imagine having large stocks of rabbits would be very detrimental to said environment and might, you know, result in even more desertification. So basically, don't raise rabbits, because if you do, you're probably going to end up making Israel just one giant desert. And
Which
nobody's
is
going
what
to want
happened
that.
in Central Australia. And there'll be no food for the sheep and the goats. Why aren't they allowed to eat pigs? Because this is a big issue for Marvin Harris. Why not eat pork? I love pork. Melissa, you haven't got much of a chance. Go ahead.
Does it have to do with them being sacred?
Not ancient Israelites. They weren't sacred. They were, we call them treif. They were unclean. It's a good, but that wasn't it. Joe?
I believe it's because they would almost compete with the humans for certain things agriculturally, and
Pigs are omnivores. They eat the same food as people. Pigs in Anwar, did you want to add to that?
Just that in hot climates, they tend to cool themselves off by dwelling in their own excrement, and they're considered unclean.
Right. Pigs don't sweat, as do dogs. How do dogs perspire?
through their paws.
No, through their mouth.
Oh,
They
have their pores are in their paws for certain ones.
Yes, but mostly by panting. Pigs don't perspire. What they have to do is they have to constantly wallow in moisture. Well, the problem is that the Middle East is arid. There's not moisture, but also pigs in temperate Europe and in temperate zones in China and Asia, they can wallow in water and they can root for food in the forests. But in a dry climate, there's no water for them, so it's very difficult to raise them. But also in that climate, they're competing with humans for food. So that if the wealthy have pigs and the poor don't have food, what you're doing is creating a tremendous amount of class conflict. But I always find the locusts and the crickets and the grasshoppers most interesting. What happens when swarms of locusts, crickets, and grasshoppers invade an area? What do the swarms do? Christopher Grau?
Don't they destroy the crops and any agriculture?
They eat everything. There's nothing left. The only thing left to eat when you're attacked by a swarm of locusts, crickets, or grasshoppers are the locusts, crickets, and grasshoppers. So if you don't eat them, there's no other food. The thing is, as you begin to look at this, you begin to discover that there were reasons why some foods were considered good to eat in the Old Testament and some foods are not. The other thing that's in Leviticus are the sexual taboos. According to Leviticus 20:11, the man that lieth with his father's wife hath uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Why would you have a passage forbidding you from sexual relations with your father's wife? Jason?
Sorry, I was eating something. Is it because life was more nomadic and you lived in smaller communities where if you had, this is when people had multiple wives, right?
Yes.
So if you have children with, it's just doing too much, because if you have kids with your, and then they go to have children and then it just creates problems.
What's the problem it creates, Jason?
Genetic defects.
Okay. But they don't know anything about genes. But it creates a social problem. And what?
Also, doesn't it create problems regarding inheritance and inheritance in terms of lineage, but really inheritance and property, right?
Massive property issues. Christina.
No, Anwar just said, I was going to say property, like inheritance of property. You won't know if you don't know who's the fault, or like you won't know which child to give the property to.
Christopher?
I was going to say maybe it's an overpopulation problem and the strain on limited resources.
Okay. Jenna?
Sorry, you're just asking what what's wrong with it, correct?
Yeah, why are they sentencing you to death if you have sex with your father's wife?
That's your mother, but like everyone was saying, it's
wait. What'd you say?
It's your mother.
That would be incest.
Yeah.
Is your father's wife necessarily your mother?
Oh, no, it's not necessarily your mother, because they might have had multiple wives.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So I would say they'd be put to death, though, just so that people don't do it.
Okay.
Like it's extreme, so people don't do it.
Right. Why do they have to have such an extreme penalty so people don't do it? Jenna?
Because people would do it anyway?
Because people are doing it. We're looking at bands, semi-nomadic people living in tents with extended families. And here you have the father with 4 wives. The oldest wife is probably close to his age. His younger wife might be a teenager. And here he has sons who are in their 20s or maybe teens, who may actually be the same age as his 4th wife. And they're all living together in a tent. Well, why do you have to have that harsh rule? Because otherwise it is going to happen. It's a taboo because it's a normal practice. If it wasn't going to happen, you wouldn't need a taboo. The man that commits adultery with another man's wife, even if he commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Why is the penalty for adultery with a neighbor's spouse death? That has to do with what Christina raised earlier, which is what?
Property?
Yes, but there's another factor. These extended bands have to live together. And why?
I was going to say proximity, social proximity.
They have to live together. They have to be able to survive together. They have to be able to depend on each other. And in patriarchal society, wealth, property that is accrued, status that is accrued is inherited through the father's line. Now, there are matriarchal societies where property is inherited through the mother's line. In matriarchal societies, it doesn't make a difference who the woman sleeps with, because the property, the family's wealth, it stays with the mother. But in patriarchal societies, the wealth stays with the father's family. So who the father is becomes very important. We always know who the mother is. The only way we can know who the father is if women are subject to total control. So what we have in patriarchal societies are women historically being subject to total sexual control. The best known matriarchal society was the Aborigines in Australia. And part of what George Shaw was writing about was when the English discovered the Aborigines, because the Aborigines were matriarchal. The women and they lived in the women's households, and actually the woman's brother helped to raise the children. And because of that, there were no sexual restrictions on the women, and it drove the British nuts. How could that be? They actually confiscated mixed race children, took them away from the families because it was a mark of sin. And in the British moral code, based on the law of nature on their small island. I want to take a look at the last one, which people have more difficulty with. Leviticus 20:13 says, if a man also lieth with mankind as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed abomination. They shall be surely put to death. What's being described here? Let someone else go on more. Okay, Joseph?
Is it describing homosexuality?
Yes. Same penalty for women lying with women, but they don't really care about women lying with women. But they're very abandoned on men lying with men. And that passage has become justification for homophobia in the Western world for the last 2,500 years. Why are they saying it is a sin punishable by death to have homosexual relations? Tiffany?
Isn't it because they want men and women to procreate? It's not necessarily because they don't want men to be together, because homosexuality happened way before any of this anyway. So I think it's more of a sense because they wanted more procreation, which is don't
Well, then
want men getting
why not just let the women
jealous
sleep?
of other men who sleep with their wives.
Yeah, but then why not let the women sleep with anybody they want? If the goal is procreation, why are you having rules against adultery? Jason? Let Jason go, Tiffany. You're breaking up. Jason?
Does it have to do with social control, like you didn't allude to, you said earlier?
I think a big part of it is social control, but there are other factors going on here. The ancient Hebrew, Anwar?
I'll just tag on the social control, but also, as far as I can see, labor control. Same-sex couples are less likely to procreate and less likely to be bound to having to hold down jobs and being, employed, because they don't have the obligation of taking care of children.
You also have the problem, they don't have anybody to take care of them when they get old. But there's another factor going on. And someone said this when we talked about community identification with religious beliefs. In the Middle East, the ancient Hebrews had a major enemy. And what's interesting is we all know about them, but in social studies, we study about them from the other end. Who conquers the Middle East to bring culture and civilization? There are two great Mediterranean empires that conquer them. Chris Heilig? You raised your hand. Chris, who
fix
conquered?
it. The Greeks and the Romans, or would this
Yes.
still be?
Yeah, the Greeks and the Romans. Now, the Greek is the earlier one. This is Alexander the Great. What do we call the spread of Greek culture in that region?
Hellenification.
Hellenization.
Hellenization.
Okay. Now, the thing is, there are a couple of things about the Greek conquest. Now, the Israelites resist constantly the Greek conquest. And what holiday celebrates their final defeat of the Greeks?
Hanukkah.
That's Hanukkah, right? But this is the thing. We usually teach Hellenization as a major achievement. But if we look at Hanukkah, Hellenization was imperialism and forced cultural change. And there were two things that the Greeks tried to force on them. One was dietary. If you go to a Greek restaurant, what's the difference between a Greek restaurant and a Middle Eastern restaurant? What do they serve in Greek restaurants they don't serve in Middle Eastern restaurants? Jenna, part of your family is Greek.
I know. I don't know.
All right, that's okay. Anybody? I saw a hand. Okay, Victoria.
Like cheese, like dairy products.
But there's something else that they serve.
And pork.
Exactly. Greek culture is heavily pork-based. The Greeks brought pork to the Middle East, and they defiled the temple with pig. The Greek army also had an unusual structure. Joe, I know that they said in war, you don't fight for the country, you fight for your buddies.
Yeah, I think, it matters on who you talk to, but most of the time when you're over there, it's just, that's the only person that has your back. So it's what it is.
Did anybody ever see the movie Troy? Where Achilles, Brad Pitt kills what's his name? Hector. Who played Hector? Eric Bana.
Yep, I've seen it.
Okay, I'm going to play it very quickly for us if I can find it.
Is this the scene where he like battles them to come in, right?
Yeah, wait, let me find it. You'll see in a second. Can you see this? Okay.
Meet Suvi.
Can you see it? I need a okay.
Yeah, we can hear it.
Eric Bana is Hector. Brad Pittless. Pitiless. Is Achilles. He's a heel.
I've seen this moment in my dreams. I'll make a pact with you. With the gods as our witnesses, let us pledge that the winner will allow the loser all the proper funeral rituals. There are no pacts between lions and men. Now you know who you're fighting. I thought it was you I was fighting yesterday. And I wish it had been you. But I gave the dead boy the honor he deserved. Gave him the honor of your sword. You won't have eyes tonight. You won't have ears or a tongue. You will wander the underworld blind, deaf, and dumb, and all the dead will know. This is Hector, the fool who thought he killed Achilles.
We don't have to see the battle. Wrong thing. Who did Hector kill the day before in the movie?
He killed Achilles' cousin by mistake, thinking it was Achilles.
Because he was wearing Achilles' armor.
Yeah.
And Achilles says he was a boy. What do you mean he was a boy? He was a teenager. Why was Achilles so enraged at the killing of his teenage cousin? I mean, it happens in war. Who was his teenage cousin? It was his lover. The ancient Greek army, senior men took lovers of teenage boys. The siege of Troy probably lasted for 10 years. What do you think they were doing in the tents? The Greek scholars, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, and had lovers amongst their students. In ancient Greece, homosexuality is not only is well documented that it existed, but it was respected. The same men that had homosexual partners also had wives who they impregnated for procreation, but their love was their partner. And in war, they fought to protect their partner. When the ancient Hebrews banned pork and banned homosexuality, what they are doing is defining themselves as not Greek. Greeks were their enemy. And because of that, they had taboos about doing anything that was Greek. So the sexual taboos can be explained by looking at the conditions of their lives and the conflicts they had with their neighbors and the effort to build a cohesive body. It had nothing to do with what was morally right or wrong. It had to do with the conditions of their community. But Marvin Harris argues that we can look at the mysteries of culture, and in looking at them, we can explain why particular civilizations adopted these practices. If they weren't normal, they would not have been taboos. Now, there are two different theories about how to explain culture. One is the Avatar school, where I see you, and the other is the Marvin Harris school. Okay. The Avatar school was not developed for the movie Avatar. It was actually developed in the 1920s by a cultural anthropologist at Columbia University named Franz Boas. And Boas had two very famous students, Margaret Mead and Zora Neale Hurston. No one outside of scholars remembers Franz Boas, but everybody remembers Margaret Mead and Zora Neale Hurston. Does anybody know what Margaret Mead's famous study was? It's called Margaret Mead. Franz Boas believed that the only way you could understand a culture was to become part of it. You had to understand it from the inside. Jason?
Isn't that where participant observation comes from?
Yes, that's the idea. But she becomes a participant. Do you know what culture she becomes a participant in?
I remember it was overseas somewhere.
Yes, Samoa, Polynesia. Margaret Mead goes to live amongst Samoans in Polynesia to understand the sexual and maturation processes of teenage girls. Following Boas' idea of understanding from the inside, Margaret Mead essentially goes to live with these girls to understand the transformation points in their lives so she can see them. It's called Coming of Age in Samoa. Zora Neale Hurston is an African-American woman who goes to live in African-American communities in northern Florida to understand the culture there. She decides not to do an anthropological study, however. Does anybody know what Zora Neale Hurston is famous for? Juliana?
The novel Their Eyes Are Watching God.
Exactly. She, instead of telling her the story of the culture in academic texts like Margaret Mead, she tells the story in novel form. That's her most famous novel, but she has a series of novels where she explores the culture from the inside by becoming a participant observer. And the Sigourney Weaver character in Avatar, the anthropologist, is becoming part of that culture to understand them. And Marvin Harris argues that this approach is ridiculous for a number of reasons. One is the Van Heisenberg principle of physics. Does anybody know the Van Heisenberg principle of physics? Van Heisenberg, who was a nuclear theorist, a very famous one, and he was a Nazi, and he was trying to develop the atomic bomb for Germany, but they failed, fortunately. But his principle was that in subatomic particles, we cannot know their speed and their location. There is always what he calls, it's the uncertainty principle. We can know their speed or we can know their location, but we cannot know both. Does anybody know why we can't know both? He argues that the act of measurement of speed changes location. The act of measurement of location changes speed. By intervening, we are changing the thing that we are trying to study. So we can never study it exactly. And Marvin Harris makes the same point about the Boas study of culture, that by Margaret Mead entering the Samoan culture, she changed the thing that she wanted to study. It no longer was what it was before she arrived. By Zora Neale Hurston going as an urbanized, educated person, going to live in these sugar fields, she changed the circumstances. It no longer was what it was before. Boas argued, well, if we go and live with them, we can ask them questions about why they do things. And Marvin Harris's response was that people don't really know why they do things. They think they believe in God because God does miracles. But it may just be they believe in God because they don't have answers. They may just believe in God as a part of their community. We can't know that by joining the community. We can only know that by observing it from the outside. So in anthropology, there are two main schools. Those who argue that anthropologists have to go inside the box, and those who argue anthropologists must remain outside the box so as not to disrupt the life of the people they are observing. You can be an observer, but you cannot be a participant. So Marvin Harris, by looking at the conditions of people's lives, sets out to explain what he sees as the great mysteries. Your first assignment for tomorrow, the paper is due Thursday, but tomorrow we're going to discuss it. So you want to read it. You don't have to read the whole book for tomorrow. You want to read the preface, the prologue, cows and pigs. And then Victoria, you're going to talk about primitive war. Christina and Melissa, you're going to talk about savage males. Christopher Grau and Romello, you're going to talk about potlash. Chris Heilig and Tiffany, you have phantom cargo. Ryan and Jason, you have Messiah. Isabel, you have Prince of Peace. Juliana and Anwar and Joseph, you have Witch Craze. Richard, you're going to do Messiah as well. And Jenna, you're going to do Prince of Peace as well. And Alana, you're going to do Primitive War as well. Now, if you have the book, you got the book. But if you don't have the book, I sent it to you as a PDF. It's also on the Blackboard page, which I've unleashed. So for Thursday, you're going to write about 500 words about cultural materialism, looking at cows, pigs, and your own chapter. But for tomorrow, you want to be prepared to talk about your own chapter. Mr. Heilig.
I'm sorry, you said 500 words for the assignment Thursday?
Is that what I said in the, what I say, 1,000 words?
You said 1,000 words.
Then 1,000 words. Thank
We can
you.
do 500.
No, do 1,000.
All right.
You won't be able to do 500 because it's 3 chapters.
All right. So we have to read the prologue, the preface, the prologue, cows, pigs, and then what you assigned us, our own individual ones. All right.
It'll take, it's an hour's reading, the whole thing. They're very short chapters. And big print.
Alan,
Yes.
when we discuss our chapters, you just want us to discuss it. You don't want us to create a PowerPoint for it, right?
Right. No, there's not enough time.
Verifying. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to close the slideshow, reduce it. I have some other slides to look at, but we may not get to them. That's always the nature of things. In the methods class, I always say that the next lesson I actually finish everything will be the first. I've been teaching for over 50 years. I've actually been teaching for over 50 years. I started in 1970. All right, I want to pull up the course outline. Can you see that?
Yes.
Let me just go through it quick.
Do you want to make it bigger, Alan?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The first thing is Martin Luther King's birthday. If we were having a face-to-face class, there would be no class on Martin Luther King's birthday. Hofstra is going to be closed. Since we're responsible for doing so many hours of class, we have to make a choice. We can either have class on January 17th, or we can extend and have the last class January 24th. Given that some of you are going to be starting student teaching, my preference is to have the class on the 17th, so that the last class would be the 20th, so people could prepare to student teach. Is there anybody who objects? If someone objects, we can't do that. Okay. The next, I spoke to, so Julie, you're going to follow the social studies curriculum. Alana, you have a choice. You could follow the social studies, which most of the people are following, or you could do the 3 novels.